Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers before we start this new book, Uddhava Gita today. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhūrbhuvah Swaha, Tatsavitra Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Asto ma satgamya, tamso ma jyotirgamya, mrityur ma amritam gamya. Om sehna bhavatu sehna bhunaktu saviryam karvavai, tejasvi navaditamastu ma vidvishavai. Om shanti 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 om. So if you have the books in front of you, do open it on page number 2. That's where we're going to start reading. Because before that, there are some prayers. And you can just read those prayers on your own. And let's start with the introduction to really understand what this Uddhava Gita is about. So Uddhava Gita is a hidden treasure, practically unknown to the people of the world. And the reason for this is certainly a great mystery. Uddhava Gita was personally spoken by Lord Shri Krishna just prior to his disappearance from this material world, more than 5,000 years ago. It is the Lord's final instructions imparted to his dear devotee, Shri Uddhava. And then this book which we are studying from, or reading from, it is from the ISKCON group. So that's why you will see a lot of Swami's name in here. And especially over here, the Swami Prabhupada wrote about the Uddhava Gita. This is next page, or page and a half. That's what we're going to read about. So Lord Shri Krishna is factually the spiritual master of the three worlds, and he is the original source of all Vedic knowledge. It is very difficult, however, to understand the personal feature of the absolute truth, even from the Vedas. His personal instructions are needed in order to understand the personality of Godhead as the supreme absolute truth. Bhagavad Gita is the evidence of such transcendental knowledge in jest. One cannot know the Supreme Lord unless one is graced by the Lord himself. See why? Because these teachings are so deep, we do need a kripa also to understand it. Because these are not just the words alone. There's a deep truth hidden between the words. Lord Krishna exhibited this specific mercy towards Arjuna and Uddhava while he was in the material world. So he not only spoke those words, but graced them too. Undoubtedly, Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, just to encourage Arjuna to fight. And yet to complete the transcendental knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructed Uddhava. The Lord wanted Uddhava to fulfill his mission and disseminate knowledge which he had not spoken even in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so that's why this Uddhava Gita knowledge, you will see that a lot of answers, questions which were not answered before, they will be answered when we study this. From this, we can understand that although Uddhava Gita contains instructions similar to those imparted to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, it also contains very confidential teachings that are not available even in Bhagavad Gita. The 5 truths that embody the teachings of Bhagavad Gita: Ishvara, the Supreme Lord; Jiva, the living entities; Prakriti, the material nature; Kal, the time; and Karma, the activities or actions, are fully elaborated upon in Uddhava Gita. So good thing that we have studied Bhagavad Gita many times. So all that knowledge we should always keep in mind, because this is on top of it. The Vedic literature offers us many Gitas or songs. There are the Gita Govind, Venu Gita, Brahmar Gita, Gopi Gita, Avanti Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Uddhava Gita, and many more. Actually, there are 40 Gitas. We have already done Guru Gita also, and Ashtavakra Gita, Devi Gita. There are many, many Gitas. So all of these Gitas have one thing in common. They are either songs of the Lord himself or of his devotees. In either case, the purpose of these songs is to invoke our forgotten, eternal, loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. Because this material nature of this Maya has really covered our intellect in the ignorance. We have forgotten our real nature and real relationship with the Lord. So thus the songs found in Vedic literature, see Geet means a song. So songs found in Vedic literature are not like the ordinary songs of this material world, which are compared to the croaking of frogs, simply inviting the snake of death. Near the end of Lord Krishna's manifested pastimes in this material world 5,000 years ago, the demigods, headed by Brahma and Shiva, went to see him at Dvārakā. At that time, they submitted this appeal. Okay, so him over here means Lord Krishna. My dear Lord, previously we had requested you to remove the burden of the earth. O unlimited personality of Godhead, that request has now been fulfilled. You killed innumerable demons in order to protect your devotees, and you re-established the religious principles that had been forgotten in the course of time. You have certainly broadcast your glories throughout the world so that everyone can easily become purified simply by hearing about you. Descending into the dynasty of King Yadu, you have manifested your unique transcendental form and for the benefit of the entire universe. So we all are familiar with this Yadu name because Lord Krishna belonged to the Yadu dynasty. You have executed magnanimous transcendental pastimes. My dear Lord, pious and saintly persons who in the age of Kali hear and chant narrations of your transcendental pastimes will easily cross over the dense darkness of that terrible age. O Supreme Personality of the Godhead, O my Lord, you have descended into the Yadu dynasty, and thus you have spent 125 autumns with your devotees. So Lord Krishna was 125 years old at this point. My dear Lord, there is nothing remaining for your Lordship to do on behalf of the demigods. O Lord, you are the basis of everything, and if you so desire, then kindly return to your own abode in the spiritual world. Lord Krishna replied, I have very well understood your prayers. I have certainly executed my duty of removing the burden of the earth, but if I depart from my own abode at this time, the members of the Yadu dynasty will constitute another great burden. Therefore, before I depart from this world, I shall arrange for the withdrawal of the Yadu dynasty. Therefore, Lord Krishna inspired Durvasa Muni and other sages to curse the members of the Yadu dynasty so that while quarreling with each other, they would be annihilated. Lord Krishna then met the elder members of the Yadu dynasty and informed them, because of the curse of the Brahmins, I see many inauspicious omens foreboding great disturbances and destruction. We should therefore go to Prabhas Tirath, which is a very sacred place. There we will be able to counteract the ill effects of all our sinful activities by satisfying the Brahmins with the gifts of charity. Then, in obedience to the Lord's desire, the members of the Yadu dynasty went to Prabhas Tirth, and a fire sacrifice was performed. At that time, the men of the Yadu dynasty drank an intoxicating beverage that made them forget everything, even the identities of their mothers, brothers, fathers, children, and friends. Being intoxicated by the will of the Lord, they fought with each other, and the result was the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty. Actually, the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty was a display of the Lord's illusory energy, Maya. The Yadavs are eternal associates of the Lord and are therefore eternally liberated souls. When he had contemplated winding up his pastimes within the material world, the Lord considered how, in his absence, the members of the Yadu dynasty would suffer greatly in separation from him. It is for this reason that the Lord arranged for their return to his supreme abode before his own departure from the material world. Thereafter, Lord Balram appeared in his own Sheshnag and departed from this world. Lord Shri Krishna then sat underneath a banyan tree, meditating upon himself. At that time, Uddhav came before him and prayed, "My dear Lord, I know that you want to return to your eternal abode in this spiritual sky. I cannot bear to live without you, and so please take me with you." Lord Shri Krishna replied, "There is something remaining for you to do on my behalf in this world, and so you must stay here for some time. I will now disclose to you the most confidential understanding of religious principles, whereby even a blind man can easily follow the path and ultimately attain pure love for me. After understanding this most confidential subject matter, it will be your duty to impart it to the sages residing at Badrika Ashram, headed by Narnarayana Rishi." The reason for the Lord's descent into the material world was revealed by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita, in the 4th chapter. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. So the Lord executed his will himself, as well as through the agency of his dear devotees. It is explained by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita that only his pure devotees are fit to receive his revelation and pass it on to others. This verse, 3rd verse in 4th chapter, that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science. So this he spoke to Arjuna. The Lord had already delivered the science of the Supreme to his dear friend and devotee, Arjuna. Now, before enacting his pastimes of disappearance from the material world, he desired to deliver more confidential understandings, and he considered Shri Uddhava to be the fit candidate for receiving these instructions. The unique qualification of Shri Uddhava was revealed by the Lord himself in a verse of Uddhava Gita. So in Uddhava Gita, one of the verse, Lord Krishna says, "No one is as dear to me as you, Uddhava, not my son Brahma, not Shiva, who was born out of my very body, not my brother Sankarshan," and Sankarshan is another name for Balram, "not Lakshmi, my consort, who dwells eternally on my chest. Even my own body is not as dear to me as you are. Now I shall leave the vision of this mundane world, and I say that Uddhava, the foremost of my devotees, is the only one who can be directly entrusted with knowledge about me." So after this, a little bit more information is given that His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Śrī Prabhupada commented on this verse as follows. So this is the verse which we just read. Jnanam mad ashrayam is significant in this verse. Transcendental knowledge has three departmental divisions, namely knowledge of impersonal Brahma, knowledge of the all-pervading Supersoul, and knowledge of the personality of Godhead. Out of the three, transcendental knowledge of the personality of Godhead has special significance, as is known as Bhagavad Tattva Vigyan. Specific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. The specific knowledge is realized by pure devotional service and no other means. Bhagavad Gita confirms this. Bhaktya mam abhijanate yavan yasacha asmi tatvata. Only persons engaged in devotional service can factually know the transcendental position of the Lord. And Uddhava was considered to be the best amongst all devotees of that time. And therefore he was directly instructed by the Lord's grace so that people might take advantage of Uddhava's knowledge after the disappearance of the Lord from the vision of the world. This is one of the reasons why Uddhava was advised to go to Dvārakā ashram, where the Lord is personally represented by the Nar Narayana deity. As Uddhava was being instructed by the Lord in this most confidential understanding of the science of the Supreme, he posed the following question. The entire world is entangled in household life. How can the world's population be liberated and develop attachment for you? The Lord knew that soon after his departure, the earth would be consumed by the powerful effects of Kali Yuga. And so he advised his dear devotee not to remain in household life, but instead take to a life of renunciation, to go to a place in the Himalayas where great sages reside. One might ask, why was Uddhava instructed to renounce the material world and go to the forest? After all, he was already a liberated devotee and a dear associate of the Lord. The answer is that just as Arjuna was put into illusion on the battlefield of Kurukshetra so that Lord could speak the Bhagavad Gita to him, and thus to the entire world, similarly Uddhava was advised to stay in this world after the Lord's departure, just so that he could deliver these final and most confidential instructions to the sages at Dvārakā ashram, and thus to the entire world. This conversation between the Lord and his dear devotee has been appropriately named Uddhava Gita. Although Lord Krishna is the speaker and Uddhava is the listener of the divine song, Uddhava Gita begins by citing an ancient conversation that took place between Maharaj Yadu and a wandering mendicant, who although naked appeared quite healthy and self-satisfied. And another thing you should remember, this Uddhava Gita is part of Bhagavad Puran. And in our classes, we have read Bhagavad Puran. So most of us are familiar with, but we read that in Hindi. So now in detail, we'll read it in English also. So conversation between Lord Krishna and Uddhava in Bhagavad Puran. So you can always go back and check it out too. Just like conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna was part of Mahabharata, even though it's in Gita, that's called Gita, Bhagavad Gita, but part of Mahabharata. So the supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So this is from Bhagavata. Such a self-satisfied person always engages in remembering Lord Krishna's transcendental pastimes. Yadu Maharaj, see, this Uddhava Gita has several chapters. Even though this whole Uddhava Gita is it's called a Canto 11 of Bhagavad Puran. And what is a canto? Canto is like a major division of a long poem, like a subdivision. That's a canto. But in that subdivision itself, there are several chapters. There are about, I think, 24 or 25 chapters. So, and the book which you are holding, you will see all those chapters separately. So that's why he said the very first chapter starts from the story. And there are a lot of stories in there. With the help of the stories, Lord Krishna imparted this deep knowledge to Uddhav and to us. So Yadu Maharaj offered his respects to the contented and naked wandering mendicant and said, I would like to know something. You are naked and you have no possessions. You do not beg for your subsistence and you roam freely throughout the world. How is it that you look so happy and healthy? I want to know about this. See, normally we think that we'll be happy when we have everything. Or if we have more, we'll be happier. But over here, he was naked without anything, but he was happy. So in response, the naked sage explained how he had attained the state of self-realization by accepting 24 teachers. By observing their characteristics, he had attained his exalted spiritual status as an unattached and self-satisfied person. Uddhava Gita contains unparalleled instructions of the Lord that are not found anywhere else in this world. Many subjects were briefly discussed by Lord Krishna when he spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. In the Uddhava Gita, these subjects are dealt with more elaborately and they are explained in a way that they can be practically applied. We can understand that although Lord Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield of Kurukshetra in just about 45 minutes, he spoke to Uddhav while comfortably seated beneath a banyan tree and thus was able to impart more detailed and confidential instructions. Being at ease, Uddhav was free to pose numerous technical questions on a variety of subject matters pertaining to the perfection of spiritual life. And the Lord replied without constraints. It is our great fortune to be able to present the Uddhava Gita, which is contained within the 11th canto of Śrīmad Bhagavatam, as a separate book. 11th canto of Śrīmad Bhagavatam has been described as the crown on the head of the Lord. Śrīmad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and beginning the study of that great literature with the first canto is considered to be meditation upon the lotus feet of the Lord. So now after this, you can read on your own. Some of the names are given of that lineage. So let's look at the chapter summary, chapter 1. This is page number 9 now. This chapter describes how Uddhav requested the Lord to grant him permission to go back to Godhead, and how in response the Lord suggested that he take to the renounced order of life. It also deals with the Avadhut's description of 24 spiritual masters. After hearing the prayerful request of Uddhava, Shri Krishna revealed to him his desire to return to his eternal abode, since the purpose of his appearance in this world had been fulfilled. The Lord also indicated that soon after his disappearance, Kali will create great disturbances in the world. Kali means Kali Yuga, the dark ages. So Uddhav should take sannyas, fix his mind upon him, and live in this temporary world without attachment. while acting as the benefactor of all living entities. So that means live for the others, help others, but you yourself stay detached. Uddhava replied by saying that apart from devotees of the Lord, detachment from matter, which is the cause of spiritual advancement, is extremely difficult for those who are very attached to sense gratification. He requested the Lord to give him some instructions so that materialistic people who consider the body as the self could attain perfection. Uddhava told the Lord that he had taken shelter of him as the only instructor because he is free from all faults. Omniscient, the Lord of Vaikuntha, and the friend of all living entities. After hearing Uddhava's request, the Supreme Lord said that the spirit soul is himself can act as his spiritual master, and thus the human form of life is very dear to him. In this connection, the Lord related to Uddhava a conversation between an Avadhut and King Yadu that took place long ago. Once King Yadu, the son of Yayati, happened to see an Avadhut who was happily wandering about here and there, sometimes acting like a materialist, sometimes like a madman, and sometimes like one haunted by a ghost. When King Yadu asked the Avadhut about the cause of his ecstatic wanderings, he replied that he was traveling throughout the world as he liked. After having received instructions from 24 spiritual masters, such as earth, air, sky, water, and fire. Due to these instructions, he was able to wander over the earth in a liberated condition of life. From the earth, he learned how to become steady. He also learned from the mountains and trees of the earth how to do good to others, how to live in this world only for the sake of others' benefit. From the life air, he learned how to remain satisfied with whatever is easily achieved for keeping the body and soul together. In addition, from the external air, he learned how to remain aloof from bodily sense enjoyment. From the sky, he learned that the spirit soul, which is all pervading throughout the body, is always pure and free from any contamination. From water, he learned how to remain naturally pure and sanctified. From fire, he learned he eat anything and yet not become contaminated. He also learned from that a charitable person will never face inauspiciousness. He learned that the spirit soul is that which illuminates every material body, and that the appearance and disappearance of the living entity at the times of death, birth and death is unseen. From the moon, he learned how the material body develops and then dwindles. From the sun, he learned how, despite remaining in contact with the objects of enjoyment, one can remain unentangled. He also learned to see how the spirit soul is unchangeable, while the material body is simply a designation. From the pigeon, he learned about the consequences of too much affection for one's family. A person who, in spite of receiving the human form of life, which is considered the gateway to liberation, becomes attached to family life like a pigeon, will certainly fall down, even though he has attained a superior platform after much struggle. So this is just a summary of the chapter. And then in these verses, in this chapter, we'll see the actual words also. So this is just a summary. Just remember that this is the summary of the first chapter. And you will see again, Lord Krishna is speaking, the Bhagwan Uvach, that is Lord Krishna. Then you will see the questions by Uddhava also. Then you will see the name Shuk also, because remember that it is part of Bhagavad Puran. And Bhagavad Puran is spoken by Shukdev ji to Parikshit. So do not forget that where all this is coming from Bhagavad Puran. Okay? So that's why this Shri Bhagavan Uvach, the Supreme Lord said, O most fortunate Uddhava, what you have ascertained about my desire to destroy the Yadu dynasty and then return to Vaikuntha is correct. This is actually my desire. And Brahma, Shiva, and the other demigods are praying for me to return to my abode in Vaikuntha. Okay, and this book is written exact translation of the Sanskrit verse from Bhagavad Puran, then a very small commentary and a purport also. Purport means the meaning according to this Swami. Okay, so that's why it's important to read the original translation and then see what the Swamis are saying too. So commentary, the word Swarvas. See, there is a term Swarvas here. That means residence in Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha, that's where the Krishna lives. That's where the Vishnu lives. Okay. In the meaning, the word Swarvas refers to the planets where the demigods reside. Although Lord Vishnu is sometimes counted among the demigods, his residence is in Vaikuntha. The heavenly planets created by the Lord's external potency, Maya, are different from his abode. Lord Vishnu is the supreme controller of all controllers. From him, all the demigods have manifested, but they are under the control of Maya, whereas Lord Vishnu is the controller of Maya. Okay? So demigods are what? Those other devtas, they are called demigods. Like a Surya Devta, Agni Devta, Indra Devta, Varun Devta. Okay? The Supreme Lord Vishnu is the root of all existence, and the material world is just a dim reflection of his eternal spiritual abode. He is one without a second, and the original source of all spiritual and material manifestations. Lord Vishnu is a plenary expansion of Lord Krishna, the original source of all Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva expansion. So the next verse he says, the mission for which I descended on this earth. So still Lord Krishna is speaking, along with my plenary portion, Balram.
Done in 10. मैं नीचे का संभालूंगी. Okay. Don't worry.
The noble act of diminishing the burden of the earth because of the prayerful request of Brahma has now been fulfilled. So the reason he says, I have descended on earth, that work has been done. Okay. And then Anshen, the word Anshen means with Balram. Balram was a Ansh. See, there are Ansh avatars, then there are Puran avatar. So Lord Krishna is a avatar of Lord Vishnu. And Balram is the Ansh avatar, a portion. So the word Anshen generally means incomplete. It indicates an incompatible situation within the material kingdom. But in the realm of spiritual variegatedness, this word refers to the inseparable portions of the Supreme Lord. So that's why whenever God comes, the other powers of God, they come with him to help him to go through this Leela. So let's just look at only up to the verse 5, and then we'll start with the verse 6 next week. This way you can study on your own also and see what do you really get out of this book. Now, as a result of the Brahman's curse, and when we were reading Mahabharata, we understood what this curse is also, the Brahman's curse. The Yadu dynasty will be annihilated in a fratricidal war, and on the 7th day from today, the ocean will overflood the city of Dvārakā. O saintly Uddhava, I will soon abandon this earth. Thereafter, being overwhelmed by the age of Kali, the earth will become bereft of all piety. Simply by the advent of Krishna, the entire world became filled with all kinds of auspiciousness. Okay, with the help of a good personality, auspiciousness is there. Wherever there is no existence of the Supreme Lord, the path of argument is prominent and the path of disciplic succession is attacked. Shri Krishna, who enjoys variegated spiritual pastimes, is an ocean of nectarian mallows. Wherever a relationship with Krishna is absent, useless mental speculation becomes prominent, which creates quarrel due to the influence of Kali. If the existence of the Supreme Lord is not realized, people who are deceived by the illusory energy of the Lord are made to run after the path of mental speculation and dry arguments. So that means sometimes we just, our mind wants to just have a doubt about these things and we start arguing about it. Purpose of this great scripture is to enhance more love for God. Become a devotee of that level. My dear Uddhava, you should not remain on the earth after I return to my eternal abode in the spiritual sky, because Kali Yuga will influence human beings so that they will become accustomed to performing all kinds of sinful activities. For this reason, you should not remain here. So he's giving these instructions to his disciple. So Uddhava was not only a disciple, he was his cousin also. Uddhava's father and Krishna's father, Vasudeva, they were brothers. So they were first cousins also. In fact, they looked very much alike too. Human beings in the age of Kali are very interested in pursuing sinful propensities because they are unaware of the advent of the Supreme Lord. So the devotees of the Supreme Lord who are sober and gentle do not wish to live in this world, which is covered by the darkness of ignorance and is devoid of a loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. One of the symptoms of a devotee is that he takes pleasure in residing at a place where the Lord enacts his pastimes. Thus, Lord Krishna advised Uddhava not to remain on earth in Kali Yuga. So we'll stop it here. And now you got some little idea that what this book is all about. It's full of devotion actually. So when we read this, we should remember that this is a bhakti. Okay. So, and this is a history also. Uddhava was present there when Lord Krishna was present on this earth. Okay. So remember that. Let's stop it here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.